I do need, as a DPE, I need to see that endorsement, that the written test endorsement was given in order for me to start the checkride, because all endorsements need to be complete. So, you know, sometimes that comes as a surprise for a lot of people, especially if they've done a online course and the CFI, you know, has verified that the written test is done and that's where it stops. And then on the day of the checkride, I ask them, hey, can I see your 6135 endorsement? And they're panicking because they don't have it with them. So luckily, most of the online courses have it in email so they can just find it in email. But I've had it a couple times where that's just not complete.
Do you need the endorsement? Like I did this for you. So I had the endorsement and then I passed the FAA test. Do you need the test results as well?
I do need the test results, even though I can see them in IACRA myself. Sure. But you should have a copy of those with you, because if for some reason IACRA is not working, then we still have a chance to fall back on paper and we can still maybe salvage the checkride. So
the certificate as well. It's both.
Yeah, sometimes you have a 141 graduation certificate which will replace the endorsement. So if that's the case, then yeah, have that 141 graduation certificate available. Yeah. Yes, sir.
You said you could document reasons for not starting the checkride. Is there a way that we can look at that so we can glean some lessons learned? And
I am sure the FAA will publish that data somewhere.
okay.
So was it you that said, I heard something about 40% of the, where did you find
that?
that?
The reason I guessed 4 was because I've watched some videos on YouTube when DPs just giving interviews talking about what you're doing.
Yeah.
And they all were kind of like 40 to 50%. We don't even get started because the logbooks aren't accurate. Or they're missing an endorsement.
Or missing an endorsement or the training.
But there's no ready accessible repository of all the reasons?
I am sure there is.
Okay.
But I have never looked for it. And the reasons are fairly limited. It is weather, mechanical, applicant not ready,
They're that basic?
other, so it's just split up in in 5 or 6 categories. And then you can write out a reason. I'm sure they record the categories. I'm not 100% sure if they actually go that deep and do something with the additional data. That's probably more for the local FSDO and local management specialist to see what the need is for new DPs. All right, any questions about this? So all the endorsements that you need to have for rating, you can find in the AC. Also partially your responsibility as a student to be involved in your own training and making sure that those endorsements are correct. Yes, Lou.
So, and maybe you're going to get to this eventually in the presentation, but as you know, a lot of the logbooks have pre-printed endorsements in the back.
Yeah.
They're different. They're not all the same, depending on which logbook you get. So there's some question about the, prepared for the practical test, that endorsement, and then the 90-day endorsement. Some of those are combined, and some of them are 2 separate endorsements.
Yeah,
What are you looking for when you look at some
I
of the logbooks?
I just look for the text in there that it satisfies the 6139 requirement.
So you're looking for the 61.39 to be behind the endorsement, right?
Not necessarily. No,
Because-
you don't know. So as long as the text is there,
Yeah.
then that reflects the endorsement, which is satisfying the reg. So yes, if you want to perfectly be complete, you should put the underlying reg in there, 61-109, 107, 105, 6165, and then write out the text.
Because again, in some of those logbooks, it's a combined endorsement.
Yes,
Some of them
I see that with the 6139 a lot. They do A6, I, and II, and then everything is written out, the 3 elements. So I'm not that picky, I don't really care.
Get into the ground endorsements.
We can.
Well, just a question on that, because it seems like now, more recently, there's a big emphasis on all the ground time being logged.
Correct.
And up until a year or so ago, that was very new to me.
Yeah.
Because if a student had their certificate from a certified ground school, their pass-fail sheet, And the area that they need, the deficient, I hate that term, but the deficient areas, as far as the FAA is concerned, they've had an endorsement that's been reviewed by the instructor. That was sufficient that the ground portion had been taken care of. But now, you guys want to have all the different ground training logged.
The FAA requires us to verify that all the training has been logged appropriately.
And
So what
that
we,
sheet that the
so what we-
DPE's made up locally,
yes,
that identifies that, that's not an official FAA form, that's something you guys made up to confirm that the ground school has been done, right?
Correct.
The ground training's been
correct.
done, so.
So there's two ways you can go about this. You can write in every logbook exactly the reg and the item number of the ground or flight training that you have given, and the DPE can verify through the logbooks and have a complete record of all that. Or you can just put it on the little form, put a date, a time, and your signature on that, and now it's a comprehensive whole, and it's literally, oh, cool, training took place. Instead of the DPE having to go through the logbook and try to find, with little scribbles from all these different CFIs, if the training took place. And now if we're missing one item, the whole check ride's not going to happen. So it is required, and we made it as easy as possible for the CFIs just to fill that out so we can comply with how it's done. It's the easiest way to comply with that, and there's multiple ways you can, but practically speaking it never works. And this was always apparently a requirement, it just was never really enforced. So, and it bubbled up and it became a big emphasis item.
So that checklist that you guys made up, it does make it easier to confirm that the ground portion has been completed.
It takes me 2 seconds to actually look at the
That's
form.
what my instructor's doing, she's just following that list, and she's ding, 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 just
Yeah.
tracking it all.
Yeah, yeah, and for 61 there's no minimum required training for ground, for example. So you could literally, put half an hour per subject matter on there, or a 0.2 or a 0.3, and if it's satisfactory completed, it satisfies the minimum requirement for that training course. And then, if you did more that you didn't write down, I think that's fine. You can always do more, but you have to comply with the minimum.
So if you have done an online course, I did an online course, and I got a certificate, which I included.
Yeah, amazing.
But nothing was ever written down for all of the
Correct.
sections. Is it
Correct,
still-
because you just get a graduation certificate. Your instructor signs off for the checkride
Yeah.
that he or she has went through all the training material required for that rating. So even though you did do a ground school, the instructor still has to go through all that subject matter to bring it to, if it's not road, it's application correlation level, to be ready for the checkride. And they sign off on that because they sign off for private pilot, I think it's 61105, top of my head.
I think that's where some people get confused, is they confuse the ground school with the ground lessons. That
Yes.
you have to have.
The ground,
They're together, you have to have them.
the easiest to separate that in your head is the ground school prepares you very well for a written test, which is an ABC answer. The instructor will bring that information. Hopefully you did the study work, so there's no rote memorization that needs to take place where the instructor has to quiz you about, what is that, what is here, what is that. That they can bring it to application correlation into like scenario-based areas. That's where we need to be with that. So split those two things. So what the instructor does is just getting you to practical application of the material. And you need somebody for that because
Super helpful.
the book is not going to tell you that, and some online ground school is not going to be able to bring you to that level because they just present material that's just for the masses, not for your specific situation here at Skagit Airport.
I actually found that the ground lessons I have with my instructor one-on-one actually prepared me better for the FAA test.
Yes,
It did. It's
Yes.
great, but
because they bring you to understanding the stuff. They built the connections like, oh, this is why I study this, and this is how it applies to my flying. Oh, now I understand why I'm doing this and how it falls into the bigger picture. Yes. So, Any questions on this subject?
Hey, Jim, so can you go back and, just as another example, I was telling you about that article and stuff about like the cross country with the mileage and the different GPS programs like ForeFlight and all that
Okay.
stuff with
And I've ran into this a few times. So there's three ways we can measure something. That is with a plotter, which is fairly inaccurate, most likely. With a program like ForeFlight, SkyVector, you said FlyQ.
FlyQ.
There is so many different types.
With the Garmin GPS or Garmin whatever, Garmin Pilot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Most of them do a good job making sure that the numbers are the same. A cross country, if you measure it in one program and it says 51 nautical miles, it should hopefully show the same in another application that you use for flight planning. But there's been some areas where I believe Auburn to, or Arlington to Auburn is 50.0 nautical miles in ForeFlight.
It has to be 0.1, right?
And 50.1 in SkyVector. So, and then when I measure it, I can't see that far. It's really hard to say, is this or this is not. So how do we avoid, as instructors and as applicants, confusion, or maybe the situation where the DP says, well, you're really pushing it.
Go to the next airport.
Pick the next airport, go 10 more miles down the road and just make sure that you qualify for the minimum requirement. I mean, at the end of the day, you're going to be flying regardless. The 10 more miles is not going to break the bank, but you will satisfy the regs. And I've had it. I've done checkride. Well, I wanted to start checkrides, and I look at the cross country, it's 48 nautical miles. It's like, come on. Now we can't start because you're 2 miles short. Why?
Well, but then it actually does break the bank, because you just paid.
No, they don't pay. No. I cannot start to checkride until all requirements have been met. So until that time, so I'm verifying the applicant and all the information, I'm verifying the flight training, all the endorsements, and I'm checking the airplane as well and making sure that it is suitable for the checkride. Until that time, no money is changing hands.
Okay.
Yeah, we cannot start until that has happened. No, that's not fair. You cannot take checkride money from somebody and then not start to checkride. That's terrible. But yes, so it's a waste of time. It's a loss typically. It's a loss for the flight school because they reserved an airplane for 2 or 3 hours and that airplane is not flying now. The applicant, it's really sad for an applicant when they can't get the checkride done because for some reason something didn't work out. It typically takes more money for them and more time for them to stay at that checkride level. And of course, it's frustrating for the DP as well. Nobody likes.
There's a lot of work and a lot of time to get to that point.
Yes.
For half a mile.
Any other questions? I already scared him off.
Scared's easy.
Oh, there you go. You one of your students?
No.
All right. ID, medical, pilot certificate, written test results. They all need to have the same name on them. We can make some changes, but they're very limited of what we can do. So here I put my name up a few times. Jim E. Simon, James Edward Simon, James E. Simon Jr. Make sure that before the checkride that you preferably when you get your student pilot certificate, that you verify that everything is matching. Because ultimately the 8900 order does say that every name has to exactly match the ID. So, like I said, we have some limited opportunities to make corrections. Typically we have to go paper application at that point. That's a lot of extra work, and the potential for mistakes on a paper application are significant, which would mean that it gets kicked back from Oklahoma, and the issuance of your new certificate is going to take a lot longer than the 60 days or so that it takes now for the FAA to send you a new certificate. So, all right, talk about scheduling, cancellations, weather. Scheduling is difficult for, what's the average wait time here in Skagit for DPE?
Month at least.
Yeah, so that's quite a long time. And because it's a month, as an instructor and probably as a student as well, by the time you start getting towards the end, you probably want to get it onto the books. And that's what happens a lot of times. The applicant is not quite ready yet, but it's a month away, so they just stick it on the DPE schedule. And now they're trying to finish the rating just before the checkride. And we live in Washington, so weather is always a problem. And we see sometimes that it just doesn't work out because it's been raining for 3 weeks, and the applicant hasn't been able to, for the last week, to even look at an airplane, and they're just not ready. Some DPEs are a little stricter about that than others. I kind of myself go with the flow. And I say, well, you know what, it happens once in a while, it is what it is, I understand. I don't sweat it too much. I get some cancellations because of that. But there's DPs that say, I cannot accept a date for a checkride unless the applicant is ready. So, you know, I think the truth is probably somewhere in between. So I do take reservations sometimes a month out. And yeah, sometimes they cancel.
So what would you define, in your opinion, as the applicant is ready? Like they passed the stage 3 check? Or is it a feel? You know, like, because the stage 3 check, I would feel is like that.
I think it's situational. So in the summer, it's easier to work that than in the winter because weather is not as big as a factor. Yeah, so if you have 3 stages, then probably what I see a lot of people do is reach out somewhere in the middle of stage 3. They basically just got to do their cross countries for private,
Right.
and then they just put it on the books. So they're basically 2 weeks out completing the training, and the ride may take another 2 weeks from there. Which I don't like it either when an applicant's waiting for a month and a half, because it's terrible. You got to keep training. And if you don't, then your skills slowly starting to fade. It's hard to keep the body warm for that long.
You also have, like a check ride gets scheduled and it has to be canceled or postponed because of weather or whatever reason. And then you got to worry about, is the 90-day endorsement current?
Yeah.
And then 3 hours within
Yeah.
2 calendar months of the check ride, and showing up with current pubs, and pubs get outdated, and all of that,
Yeah.
It becomes real complicated. It can become real complicated at the end. You gotta make sure all that stuff is current, and that could extend it even more.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. So, and now you show up on the check ride and it's not current, and now the check ride doesn't happen.
One time, they take a check ride, and the pubs expired the day of the check ride. But the student called the examiner and said, hey, I can't get new pubs, they're not available yet. And the examiner recognized that and said, okay, that's fine.
Yeah, it is what it is.
That would depend on the DPE,
Yeah, right.
Here you go again. Yes. Yes.
All those things come into play right at the end, and
Always.
and a CFI should be checking that, but because of all those things coming in together, it would be, it would be easy to miss one, not that you should miss one, but you could because of the timing.
What we started to do with our CFIs is we just made checklists, because pilots love checklists. And a few days before the check ride, we just give that CFI the checklist and have them go with their applicant through that checklist and make sure that it's all checked off. And then,
One of those two.
yeah, I know, you just, you got to use them.
Yeah.
And then weather. Weather is one of those things we can't steer. If I could, I wouldn't be talking to you here today, because it would be a nice sunny day, I'd be laying on the beach. But
Gotta love an atmosphere.
so what I want to point out though is we always talk about personal minimums, right? For some reason on checkride day, in the oral examination, everybody always has weather minimums, but then when we get to the airplane, suddenly gusting 20 is just fine, right? Or ceilings of 1,800 feet overcast, suddenly that's all okay. So make sure that it's always okay to cancel the checkride for weather. Sometimes, it stays foggy here, or something moved in and it changes. Don't feel that you have to go take the checkride because the examiner is here now and you want to get it done and the examiner wants to get it done and maybe it's going to take another 2 weeks before you can get on again. Pull the plug. So scheduling, cancellations, and weather. Any other questions?
Yeah, around that. So let's say that you are gonna schedule the check ride, say it's Saturday at Tacoma. And it looks like it's gonna be doable for an instrument check ride. You get down there, it's pretty dicey, the wind pops up, weather moves in, but we've started the check ride.
We started the check ride.
So I understand you guys have to do the whole check ride all in one day.
No.
Okay,
There has to be a reasonable expectation
that it can be completed.
that the check ride can be completed in order for me to start.
Got it.
So when I look at the TAFs like yesterday, I look at the TAFs and there's no way in 2 mile visibility with 300-foot ceilings that I can do an instrument check ride. I'm not going to start it. But there is these days where it looks pretty good and I'm a believer and the applicant is a believer. Sometimes I talk to the instructor as well and the instructor says, yeah, I think we can start a check ride. And then if for some reason after the oral examination the weather just turns for the worse, we can just give a discontinuance, which means you get credit for what you have completed and you get 60 days to complete the rest of the check ride. After those 60 days, it's a whole new check ride and you'll pay again and you got to do the oral and the flight again. So in the winter, when the weather is terrible, I'd rather not start them than carrying a whole bunch of applicants that are having a 60-day limit, because I take it personal. When I start a check ride, I want to finish the check ride as much as I can and not have these people go outside of the 60 days. All right, here's the good stuff. I made a list of common errors, and I think that's probably what you guys get the most value out for the private instrument and commercial courses. And that's just in no particular order, a list of all the items I see that were missing in the check rides. I take notes for every check ride and I write down, the good and the mediocre and the bad stuff. And once in a while I just go through the list and just highlight what I see most. So, common errors: navlog paper versus ForeFlight. ForeFlight is lovely and it's a wonderful tool and I use it every single day, but I know where the numbers come from and how to explain those to whoever is testing me. We see a lot of applicants that are not using ForeFlight as a tool, they're using it as a crutch. And that becomes a problem right away on the check ride, because you still have to demonstrate your knowledge of where that stuff comes from. For example, calculating true airspeed for your climb lag in your cross-country nav log. That still happens with either an electronic E6B or one of those twisty-turny E6Bs, or some people even have an application on their phone that's mimicking some E6B. A lot of people are unable to calculate. You ask them, where's the true airspeed coming from in your nav log? And I say, ForeFlight gave it to me. That is not the correct, it's a correct answer, but it's not the answer that the examiner is looking for. We need you to be able to verbalize that you got the indicated airspeed out of the POH, that you went to the calibrated airspeed in the POH, and you did correct for temperature and pressure, and that's how you got to that number. And let me show you how I do that. From that point on, if you can demonstrate that, you can use ForeFlight all day. But until that time, you still have to be able to demonstrate that. So the other one that's always clear when we look at ForeFlight is, where do the winds come from on your nav log? The winds aloft. And a lot of applicants say, well, it comes out of ForeFlight. Well, where does ForeFlight get it from? Oh, I don't know. You know, aviationweather.gov, winds aloft, go talk about that. You know, for example, in the winds aloft at the higher altitudes, I ask them what's 670-153, and it's a lot of wind, right? It's, what is that, 170 at 101 knots at minus 53 degrees. Basic aerodynamics are being missed. What is an angle of attack? Talking about the different types of drag, how the center of gravity affects performance and stability of the airplane. Reading chart supplements. So a lot of people don't seem to use the chart supplement book that much anymore, and there is always, for example, Payne is an airport that's pretty close by. At night at Payne, the little runway closes. And the big runway becomes right traffic for 3-4 left for the big runway pointing to the north. You know, these are fair questions, and a lot of applicants are just kind of missing that, which it's okay for you not to know, but wouldn't it be nice that you actually would take a look in the chart supplement and find that information, maybe even on the spot, have it be part of your repertoire. And we see that a lot of applicants, they're just not used to working with that, so they just look on the chart and they say, well, it's left traffic for that runway, or it's right traffic for that runway at night, and you know, the runway is closed. There's a berm at Troutdale as well, that's a popular question. So between sunset and sunrise, the chart supplement advises to have the traffic pattern on the other side of the airport to avoid the berm. Another question is the ELT battery. Where do I find the info on the half-life of the battery? Because everybody knows that the ELT needs to be inspected every 12 calendar months, and an hour of cumulative use, and 50% of the battery life, the battery needs to be replaced. And the question is, well, what is 50% of the battery life? And we get all these questions. A popular one is like, well, ton of batteries in ELT. True, probably, yes. What's the last time you looked at those? Well, I never seen, do you know where the ELT is? No, I never looked at the ELT. So how would you know, because it's still your responsibility to know, that those batteries are still good? And there's no answer. And you know, the easy answer would be, well, it's in the logbooks. You can just open the logbooks and take a look at them and see what the expiration date is. So that is the task for the instructor, to bring the applicant to application, correlation, and putting these things together. Just, you know, droning off the road memorization, well, 50% of the battery life is not enough on a checkride, because we like to ask, how do you know? Where can you find that? Right? Apply that information. Any questions about those?
Great.
Special VFR is always an area where there is a lot of confusion. You know, when can you get a special VFR? When do you need it? Who can give it to you? What are the weather minimums now? And that is just basically the road application correlation of the material. And then of course you start talking about risk management as well. So when would you do that? When would you not do that? And then we'll get to the practical application, the flight. A lot of applicants in the private pilot and the power on stall, they maintain directional control by looking inside and keeping the ball centered or the brick where it needs to be, instead of just looking outside and preventing yaw from happening by just adjusting the rudders properly. So we see a lot of power on stalls where, I mean, the applicant is heads down. You're supposed to look out 70% of the time, right, in flight training. There's a lot of trouble entering towered or non-towered traffic patterns, and we see it at non-towered airports like Skagit when, for some reason, we end up at a towered airport. The applicant doesn't have a lot of experience. Or with the towered people, when we go to a non-towered airport, there's, you know, how do I get in the traffic pattern? How do I talk? How do I stay safe and avoid other traffic? And I just talked about personal minimums. So the personal minimums that you have, and I see a lot of applicants show up with a little piece of paper that exactly says, this is my crosswind limit, this is my ceiling limit, my total wind limit. Don't change that
For the check ride.
10 minutes before you check ride, because then the list doesn't mean anything. And the thing is, as long as it's not dangerous, me as the examiner, I'm just going to shrug my shoulders, sit next to the applicant, and watch the horror unfold, right? I've even had it on commercial check rides where we're landing now with gusting 25, which is okay if you have been exposed to that and you're proficient in those crosswind landings. I mean, in Ellensburg, everybody lands in 25, you know, gusting 30 all the time. But make sure that it is within your personal minimums. Because if that's the way you're going to fly in real life, and that's what you're demonstrating to me, the examiner, your flying career is probably going to be short and very adventurous. Soft field takeoff, we see a lot of applicants not really getting that nose off of the runway, not really coming off the runway and pushing the nose over to stay in ground effect. Soft field and short field landings, the follow-up, as in soft field landing, I'm landing the airplane, maybe I have a little bit of power, still going over the elevators where I have authority to keep the nose up, or some other technique that works for you, and then touching down nice and soft and letting the airplane just roll out while still aerodynamically braking and holding the nose up off the ground as long as you can. We just see people do a beautiful soft field landing and then they just get on the brakes and just let the controls go. So there is more than just the landing itself. So I always like to split those landings in three parts. It's the approach, which needs to be stabilized. The landing itself, is it for a short field landing? Did you hit your spots? Plus whatever the margin is for that rating. And then the third, the follow-up. Are you maintaining directional control? Are you doing the things like a short field landing if your POH says flaps up, maximum braking, aerodynamic braking? Are you executing those things? As a side note, for maximum braking, you don't necessarily, at least in my check rides, you don't have to stand on the brakes. You can just say simulated hard braking and demonstrate some braking. Some DPEs like to see the full demo all the way with the brakes all the way to the floor.
You know, that was actually
Up to them.
when doing those in training.
Yeah.
You heard me to say flaps up, simulated max braking.
Yeah, and that's
It's
fine.
not often, because it's just, you've landed, you got it right, you're excited, and then they're like, and?
Yes.
And? Like, what do you mean, and? Like, oh.
So you're looking for, on a short field landing, you're looking for flaps up right after.
Depends on the checklist, depends on the POH, depends on the version of the 172 you're flying. I just go with what the POH says. So I don't have personal opinions.
Short field landing, obviously you can, when you have more weight on the landing gear, and you can use braking, you're gonna stop quicker, some DPs don't want you to reach down and touch anything because you're afraid if you're in a...
Depends on the
complex aircraft,
checklist.
You're gonna
On the N and S models, 172, it's in the checklist. You need to follow the checklist for that
The
procedure.
answer is the POH.
Right. That's why I said I don't have personal opinions. I just look at the checklist. I think the M models, you don't touch the flaps. They just say, because it says so in the checklist or in the amplified procedures, not to pull them up. That's how the manufacturer certified the airplane. That's how you fly it. It's not up to me to reinvent the wheel. So I try not to have personal opinions to do what's best. I just follow it, whatever the checklist says.
So I have a follow-up question on that, because Lou makes a good point. So DPs often have some personal preferences, right? Let's be honest. Let's say, to his point, one has a personal preference that's not in the POH, and you do the opposite of what the DPE does, and they kind of call you on it. Can you say, but that's in the POH, I'm following the POH?
I would have that conversation before you start to check right.
Probably before it, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if
Okay,
you're,
I'm following my training in the POH, like, if you have something personal, I kind of need to know.
and if the DP has a different opinion, now you can have that discussion and maybe demonstrate it the way they like to see it, because you're showing knowledge now. So and there's all kind of techniques to do stuff. I like to have that conversation before we start the practical flight, so there's no surprises. So, and maybe the DPE doesn't know, right? Maybe they learned something new that day. Typically, I've been corrected where an applicant says, well, we're going to do it this and this and this way. And I'm like, oh, you really want to do that? And I just pull up the POH and I read the POH and said, well,
There's a lot of variation in experiences that are
yeah,
told,
yeah,
you know,
yeah.
even with the DPs that this school gets.
Well, and that's so good, and that's the value of the CFI as well.
Right.
A great CFI is going to show you all these different techniques, so you have a wide variety of different things you can do. So, so I said on the checkride, for example, you need to demonstrate to me simulated hard braking. But in the training, it would be great if your CFI actually takes you to some smaller airports and actually, executes that hard braking, so you have that experience when you go out in the real world. Any questions about this? No? Who's instrument rated? Lots of DP, or lots of instructors, obviously. Yeah, there we go. Navlog calculations for the ground speed. So applicants use magnetic cores instead of true cores for the calculation. In the instrument world, when you take a magnetic course, you have to go back to true cores in order to calculate ground speed, right? That step actually gets forgotten a lot of times on paper navlogs. I don't know why. The route selection for the instrument cross-country, people are not reading the chart supplement and the preferred IFR routing, so they make mistakes there. Sometimes they can argue a good case, and this is always a discussion, but most of the time it's just safer just to follow the recommendations of the chart supplement. Going past the missed approach point in a circle to land is always a discussion. One of the items is that your initial turn should be back towards the runway. We see a lot of applicants just coming up with their own turn away from the runway environment, away from the protected area initially. That's probably a bad idea, especially since the aim tells you not to do that. On the flight portion, we see applicants go below minimums on the approach, on the circle, and getting confused entering the hold because they programmed the GPS wrong, and the GPS is doing something weird and is not sequencing properly, and they have no backup plan, or they have no spatial awareness of where they are and where they need to go, and they don't have a backup for entering the hold properly. And right there, they turn the wrong direction, and the check ride, unfortunately, is over because we're outside of the protected side. Commercial check rides. I'll start with the biggest one, power off 180 is the most difficult maneuver, seems to be in the commercial check rides. So applicants struggle the most with hitting it, and that's not just with me, that's with all DPEs across. So again, some only practice in nice weather with no wind, and then on the day off it's super windy, or they always been practicing these maneuvers in super windy weather and now there is no wind and they under or overshoot. Setting up 8s on pylons and picking the pylons is sometimes a struggle. Doing the chandelle with proper rudder inputs seems to be a struggle. The crosswind personal minimums, again, as I talked about before, weather and weather products, surprisingly. So a lot of people have a really hard time going behind the weather theory and actually applying it by looking at charts, making an interpretation, actually reading the charts. Like in the GFA, aviationweather.gov, ceilings and visibility, all the little, the most common like rain double dots or rain shower dot with a triangle. A lot of people just need a legend, even for the most common depictions of weather, to decipher that. You know, you can take this one step deeper into this material and study it a little bit more. And then for commercial, holding out is always a point where there's a lot of you know, opinions and you know, wrong ways going about it, and people are not willing to fly missions that were not a commercial operation, or vice versa. And then navlog calculations, again, nothing new there. So those are, for what I see in the checkrides, most of the
That's
errors
super helpful.
that are happening. Yeah, it's just a tally of, you know, about 400 check rides this year. So in my books.
Top 10 or whatever.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's stuff that I constantly see coming back. And I try to after every check ride, do a debrief with the instructor and have a quick conversation about the what, the where, and the how. So hopefully next time that doesn't happen. You've done a lot of check rides, Lou. You probably have signed off plenty of check rides in your career here as well. I don't know about you. You just started? No check rides done yet? Ooh, it's going to be exciting, the first one. What do you see in the field out there? What applicants are struggling with?
Nothing really different than what you've listed there. It's going to be different for each student. You know, some
Yeah.
are going to excel at certain things and not be so good at other things. I think 8s on pylons are probably the hardest maneuver for anybody to master because, you know, not to diminish the significance of it, but probably the only time you're ever going to do 8s on pylons is on your commercial check ride.
Correct.
Life.
Correct.
And it's not an easy maneuver to do, and it's also hard to teach, especially if you haven't done them in a while yourself.
Yeah.
So 8s on pylons are probably the other thing about the power off 180, that begs the question, is it better to do a check ride on a windy day? Because maybe the DPE might have some understanding that it's windy, or is it better to do it on a perfectly calm day when you're going to be expected to do everything perfectly? That's a judgment call.
The straightforward answer is it has to be within ACS standards.
Right.
It's that simple.
Yeah.
So, and it depends. I think it depends on what people are used to be training in.
Yeah.
Like I said, I have done commercial check rides in Ellensburg where it's gusting 39 or gusting 40. And I look at them, I'm like, are you sure you want to do this commercial check ride? We can do this another day. And they're like, no, we're fine. And they just pull it off in gusting 40.
I guess the other thing that sometimes a commercial candidate might have to struggle with is, I know in commercial check ride, in the oral part of the exam, there's a much greater emphasis on systems.
Yeah.
And systems knowledge, because that's part of the commercial ride. So some of the candidates for commercial need to really be up on systems and describing them and how they work and so forth.
Yes, and typically where we start is giving them failure modes and see how they troubleshoot the systems. That typically gives us a good indication of how much they know of the systems. And then once we start finding that they don't really understand the system and the consequences of something failing, that's where we slowly start digging lower and lower and lower, where we go to rote memorization of the material, which is really the lowest level that we can do the checkride on.
Right.
And then yes, we find out that they don't understand the systems. And it's so easy because the book says everything, and there is beautiful animations on YouTube about every single system you ever want to know of in the common airplanes that we fly, PA-28s, 172s. And I think as an instructor, it's so important to verify that information is there, because you as an instructor, you can't learn for them, right? I mean, so how are you going to do it? Well, you're going to give them homework. You're going to verify that the homework is done by asking questions, hopefully at your correlation level as much as you can, and then fill up the missing information. So you said 8 on pylons, yeah. Just setup is typically.
Is that what you typically see?
Yeah. It's the setup. Just the execution. Typically, once they get going, it's good. Also, the overemphasis on picking these pylons. I mean, pick one and just start to maneuver, and as you come around, you'll pick the next one. It doesn't have to be the perfect pylon on the ground. It can be anything, really.
Yeah.
So.
I actually talked to a DPE that comes here. I found out she was DPE, so I cornered her. I told her she was waiting, and I asked her, "What are you seeing out of Cascade?" Because I was just starting as a student. Like,
Yeah.
What do you see here?
Yeah.
Specifically. And she said, and this is her own opinion. There's other DPEs, obviously. She said that on the oral side, Cascade students are consistently missing mechanical and maintenance information on the oral.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the actual flight, she says that it's what I would call the specialty landing, so soft landing, short. They're a little deficient in those, and I think there were some emergency procedures that students out of Cascade are. So that's her opinion. That's what she sees. So.
And I don't know about you, but if I am bringing an airplane to checkride, and I know that the maintenance logs are going to be checked by the examiner, I'm going to make sure that I go through these maintenance logs and know every single entry that's relevant, and be able to find the ADs and spend some time on that. So that is an instructor responsibility, but it's also the student's responsibility, because in the future you are going to do this, and you're not going to fly airplanes that are well maintained at Cascade all the time. It might be your buddy's airplane, and I don't know about you, but I would like to know what I'm flying and make sure that everything is complied with, right?
In defense of our mechanics, though, as he's suggesting, we were dinged a few times on students not knowing where to find that information.
That's what I meant.
But
Yeah.
Yeah.
since then, we have the students go through whatever plane they're going to take for a check ride with the mechanic and make sure that when they know where to find the ADs, they know where all the inspections are, that they're currently.
Good.
And those are all tagged in the
Good.
aircraft
Good.
logs before the candidate comes for the check ride. So
Yeah.
And she also meant
put a lot more emphasis on that.
And she also meant just like general knowledge of the students. Like she asked some questions about maintenance mechanical, and they're not able to answer. It's all good information to know, because it's going to apply to specific.
So basically you need to know everything about everything.
Yeah.
I always say in the check
Feels
rides,
like.
perfection is not the standard, because you're never going to get there. It's just you're trying, especially the low-hanging fruit, you're trying to score as many points as you can during that oral examination. And these are really simple things, relatively simple, it's coming. And that's another thing I want to emphasize. We always talk about the ACS, and I always ask the applicant, are you familiar with the ACS? Because I'm using the ACS as a basis for a check ride, and all the standards that are applying in the ACS will apply to the check ride. And people say yes, and then I ask them questions, And it's the first time they actually, you know, think about this as being a checkride question, and I just show them in the ACS after the checkride. I'm like, it says it right here. The applicant has a, you know, understanding of, and then the subject matter, and I'm like, it's right there. If you go through the ACS, line by line by line of every subject matter that's in there, you should be able to pass a checkride, because again, I don't have personal opinions necessarily. I just apply the ACS to my test. And if you hit all the standards in the ACS, we're good to go. So, I mean, this shouldn't be a test full of surprises, right? It should be a pretty clear path of, okay, I'm here and I'm, you know, going to end with the checkride right there, and that's how it typically goes. And if there's big, very clear. So read through that document, not as a training tool in the beginning of your training, but towards the end of your training. Absolutely start digging through it, because that's what you're going to get tested on. So, any more questions? That's all I got, folks. My pleasure. Yes.
They might be a lot higher for.
Cascade Aviation, not a course, but a community. For pilots, by pilots.